Hi, folks. This is Dr. Kat Schreier here at the Water Summit in Milwaukee. Another one of our fabulous one-on-one interviews with one of the two major sponsors of and founders of the organization, A.O. Smith. Well, you're not A.O. Smith. You're Joshua Greene.
Right.
With A.O. Smith, which is one of the two organizations that really spearheaded this organization, this whole initiative. And we've been coming to the Water Summit since 2012. Actually, there's this fabulous interview with Rich Musin talking about this concept for an accelerator, concept for a global water center, which now is quite the reality, and they're seeing the fruits of that. Of that effort. So tell us about yourself and how you where you fit within A.O. Smith, and this is your first Water Summit, right?
It is my first Water Summit, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I am the new Vice President for Government and Industry Affairs for the A.O. Smith Corporation. I recently came in-house to the corporation in February of this year after being outside legal counsel for the company in Washington, D.C. for 8 years as part of my law firm practice, where I helped the company on their Department of Energy and Environmental Protection Agency regulatory issues, compliance with their products.
Sure.
Here in North America, almost every product that A.O. Smith makes is regulated by the federal government, as well as the state of California, of course, just like everything. So in that capacity, I made the transition earlier this year, and certainly continuing that activity in Washington, but also working with the company on sustainability issues, which was part of my legal background and practice, as well as helping them with their innovation pipeline and early stage company development.
So you said sustainability was part of your legal background.
Yeah.
In what sense?
Compliance and reporting. Had a number of very large public companies that had reporting obligations, as well as some smaller manufacturers that also were putting together both sustainability and corporate responsibility programs. So part of that was the legal counseling behind, all right, how do you want to scope this, structure it, report it, et cetera.
Really great stuff. We actually the Water System just moved out of its location on Capitol Hill after 8 years. And now we're completely mobile. We're home as a webpage until we can wrap up the conferences in June, and then get ready to do this Water Across America tour on our way out to relocating to LA.
Wow, exciting.
Yeah, we're going to be working with media, we're going to be working with films, and how to do the online education around that. I'm sure we'll still be coming back to DC and East Coast and Midwest and wherever the water conferences are, so we can bring these kinds of events to water citizens.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. Are you physically still staying in DC? Okay.
I'm actually opening the corporate office for the company in DC next month.
Okay. Whereabouts?
We're going to be in the Southeast by Nats Ballpark.
Oh, okay. All right. So not far from me. I was in Eastern Market.
No, not too far. Closer to the Navy Yard, but yeah, an up and coming area that's under a whole lot of revitalization, and along the lines of infrastructure wise, some of the things that we were talking about today at the Water Summit with green infrastructure, better flows for stormwater management, green roofs. The building we're moving in is a LEED Platinum certified building, so we're happy about that. So yeah.
But I think there's a huge disconnect of just how much of that sustainability and corporate social responsibility and circular economy stuff is going on in the private sector, as well as in large institutions. As I see it, having been in DC for the last 8 years, you had the executive orders, 13514, and that whole suite, and this greening the federal House, that suddenly people were doing sustainability in buildings and structured facilities at scale. And I think that's when people really stopped seeing water as just being taps and toilets and irrigation, and started making the connection that when you're dealing at those large scales of entire military base or VA hospital or whatever, your best savings on heating, on cooling, on energy costs to get water up and down floors happens in your water systems.
That is true. That is true. And certainly for us and domestic water heating systems, we're the second largest energy load in a building and even in a dwelling after you take into consideration heat and cooling. So we're always at the forefront in trying to look for products and develop products that are not only energy efficient, but also help with water efficiency as well.
Yeah. And that came up also in the resiliency conversation. So this entire conference, there's been a focus on resiliency, right?
Right.
And the last conversation was resiliency and infrastructure, and we had Commissioner of New York City during Superstorm Sandy talking about systems and buildings, which are essentially vertical towns. They've got the populations of a small town, and some of them that couldn't get water. They had water service, but they could not get the water above the 6th floor because they had no energy to get it all the way up to the top.
Yeah.
So how does A.O. Smith work with these large buildings?
Yeah, so currently our products in terms of application of large commercial buildings or industrial facilities, institutions, really are limited to our water heating products as well as our boiler products.
Right.
So as far as efficacy and sustainability and ways in which water flows and energy management is concerned in the building, I mean, we're a piece of it because we have water heating equipment. One of the things that we are watching very carefully in the market, however, to this point, are different domestic hot water systems that can be applied at point of use or can be applied in an individual dwelling unit, no matter what floor, for instance, in a high-rise building. These are tankless product or instantaneous water heaters, as we
it's a tankless job.
Tankless water heater applications, and sometimes that makes sense.
Yes,
You just have to be concerned about the water efficiency involved in that. But we are watching that.
So not having your water heater down the basement and then having to pump it all the way up to the top floor versus doing some rainwater collection. So actually, a friend of mine, Ed, I never forget what's his name, Ed. Oh crap! Ed
Bagley Jr.
No. He designed the battery park. Battery Park Towers and Ed
at the tip of Manhattan and South.
Yeah. So and there's these great photos of everything is blacked out during Superstorm Sandy, except for the buildings that he designed because they had these green infrastructure elements that also provided greater resiliency of the energy systems required to run the lights as well as to run the water.
Right.
So
no, I remember that. I'm originally a New Yorker, but
of course. Yeah.
My mother lives on the Upper West Side. Still lives on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Upper West Side of Manhattan wasn't as affected as Lower Manhattan, but I do remember seeing those pictures.
Yeah. Well, my grandparents lived in Queens,
there
and
my
parents grew up in the city. I grew up in Montclair, just across the river. With you could see the skyline, which is of course forever changed. Outside the back window, and so we went in the city all the time. So I very much relate to what Carter was talking about today.
Yeah.
So now another area where water heating in particular came up when people started looking more closely at water in buildings was the particular needs of heating water for sanitation purposes. So, all of the one of the what the biggest or second biggest federal agency in terms of their power for water was Department of Justice.
Because of the prisons.
Prisons, exactly. 24-hour facilities, right? Yep. And then you also had the Veterans Administration for the hospitals. You have all these hospitals. You got to have heating for sanitation, for sterilization, for hydrotherapy, for all of these uses of not just water, but hot water. Mm-hmm. So do you guys have more like safeguards for ensuring that the hot water stays hot under those circumstances where...
Well, most of those facilities,
it's a health
there's certainly health concerns, but most of those facilities are either utilizing very large capacity tank storage water heaters that we make, we're in a lot of federal facilities across the country, or our boilers. It really depends on capacity and size of the actual facility, institution, the load that it needs. What you are seeing increasingly, however, and I think it has a nexus to some of President Obama's executive orders on both emissions, but also on green infrastructure and sustainability, of course, is the application of district energy systems or distributed energy systems at these facilities. Now, the military does that for national security purposes increasingly, but now we're seeing that at not only federal facilities, but also buildings where the federal government is a lessee, right, through the General Services Administration. So in those applications, we will work with either the contractor or the developer to size an appropriate domestic or commercial water heating system that has redundancies and resilience worked into it. But a lot of that will be driven by building codes and building design. So we're here to help with that process and probably suggest what systems would work best, such as micro CHP and technologies like that. You can capture thermal energy, but it's still a nascent field and niche market for us. But nevertheless, those are things that we are working on.
Well, it certainly is. Some of the big brains in Washington tend to think about these sorts of issues with the Army water blueprint is something that we've covered at Water System News before, as well as Frank Riley in LMI, the supply chain, as security issues that it's less about, oh my God, the next war is going to be about water. Well, not directly so much people getting out guns over water, but water as it affects security. So if we don't have the water to build the Jeeps, if we don't have the water to build the planes, if we don't have the water to have the clothes for military. Of course, we now have a new Carter and I were in the same class at Dartmouth, as is Eric Fanning, another classmate of ours, who's now the new Secretary of the Army. So all the 90s were doing really.
Look at that.
Really well. I know. I should be wearing my green. I'm wearing my purple for wastewater. But
tomorrow.
Well, no, tomorrow I think I'm wearing red, white, and blue. It's very patriotic. But anyway.
Okay.
So a lot of interesting ways of thinking about water beyond just strictly water systems and wastewater systems. And of course, one of the main purposes of the Water Council and the Water Cluster here is innovation, and which you guys have also been a big player and had a big announcement this week. Why don't you tell folks about that?
So we did announce that in participation with the Water Council and the Brew Accelerator, that A.O. Smith will be making up to $50,000 investments in companies, as well as paying for the 12-month tuition through the Brew Accelerator program. We have not placed a cap on how many of those awards we're going to make. We are looking to work with entrepreneurs that are looking to solve problems that are important to us and our business relating to water heating, materials, as well as sensor technologies. And those are very important to us, and supporting innovation, and more importantly, supporting innovation and entrepreneurship here in Milwaukee and Southeast Wisconsin, very important to A.O. Smith.
So people want to know what's important to A.O. Smith, you watch this video because we just talked about that. Okay, it's not just about heating, it's about heating in the context of where that heating occurs and why, what the drivers are, whether it's in a building, whether it's for health purposes, whether it's what have you. So
they're excited about it.
Cool. Well, so this is exciting because right now I think Brew, they're in their third year. And as I mentioned, by the way, if you're not watching this at thewatershow.org, head on over there and you'll be able to see a chat where you can put in your questions and comments. You'll be able to see the videos from members of Brew and graduates of Brew who that's the Business Research in Entrepreneurship in Wisconsin program hosted at the Global Water Center that Some really innovative companies there. And they get their own video. We're even going to throw in the premium sponsorship where they get their own separate page and get to put other videos out there. They get a one-on-one interview. It's lots of great stuff. But so go check that out because they're really some really great companies. Now they've had 6 people or 6 companies per class so far. So this is going to more than double that.
We're hoping.
Hopefully. Okay. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Now, one of the things we also talked about is over the course of this conference is diversity, and diversity both in terms of the public that we serve and how do we recognize, we're talking about race, we're talking about economic equity, we're talking about, not dancing around, environmental justice, this and that. But I mean, there's still differences in water, who's getting the water or the issues related to water, flood zones, etc. And the importance of seeing diversity in leadership. And that includes things like who's at the top of the agencies, companies, the utilities, as well as in entrepreneurship. Now, so we have been covering the water clusters and waterpreneurship. We did the Water Innovation Nation year-end celebration and had a live Shark Tank a couple of years ago. So how does that come into play in terms of, you look at all of these accelerator programs? There's a lot of accelerator programs now around the country. There's business plan competitions, there's pitch fests, Shark Tanks, there's Piranha Tanks, all these other things. And, and these programs where people actually get office space and lab space and the benefits. This is probably the premier program in terms of getting the whole package.
I would agree. Yeah.
Minority and women-owned businesses or startups. What would be the way to encourage more of those, or do better outreach, or just see more diversity there? Because that has not been at the same level as we're seeing more diversity in terms of leadership in the other areas.
Yeah, it's an important issue, complex issue, but through diversity there is strength, and through diversity we'll have much more innovation. So we need to be not only cognizant of it, but supportive of it. It's a multi-pronged approach. We think about it all the way through getting to early stage, elementary, middle school. We talk a lot in this country about STEM programs and vocational programs. That's just one thing to do. The other is a mentorship and opportunity. And that has to be ever present in all of these initiatives, because the most successful accelerators, let alone the most successful entrepreneurs, and even us in whatever our occupations are, when you're asked the question, who had an overriding influence on you, and putting aside your parents, usually a mentor will pop up in some form or fashion. And that's what we need to be doing. More so in communities of color, and also helping certainly our women-owned businesses and entrepreneurs. And part of it is going to be, I think, outreach to the right organizations, not just outreach to all organizations, but to the right organizations and where there are pockets of untapped talent. And certainly at the collegiate level, historically Black colleges and universities, there are other organizations that do a good job in different pockets of the country. And then coming back to a theme that you had cited and also was cited today, it takes leadership from large OEMs like an A.O. Smith to others to say, this is important to us, this is what we're going to do, we're going to have a targeted approach, and we're going to have a pull through. So that it's not just a one-off. We're going to put a program in place so that there is continuity. All of those things have to happen. It's a lot, but it has to happen.
And it is career long. I had been the most senior level woman in a large environmental consulting firm. I was first woman to be eligible to become an associate in the engineering division globally. With this nest egg that I'd saved up of tens of thousands of dollars to put into buying shares to become an associate. And and was part of the leadership of just of women within that company who were actually told by the higher ups, by the principals, we need to find out why women keep leaving the company right when they get to the mid to upper levels. And the same is true for minorities. Yes, we can go to 7th graders and get them all excited about water and science and engineering and law and all the other stuff that goes into running our water systems. But if they get into those fields and start working with larger companies and are not seeing the support as they move up through the ranks, it's not just about going to 7th graders. It's who is going to be. We were talking Maureen Stapleton when she retires, which at some point, she's been there for 20 years. She's not going to be replaced by a 7th grader. So how do we take that next generation, that just under the top folks, the C-level folks, the managers, the upper management? How do we make sure that we've got diversity at that level? Because that's going to determine who's going to be the next one up top.
I would agree. Certainly providing equal opportunity to advance within organizations, that's a suite of issues in and of itself. But I also think leadership, whether it's public sector or private sector organizations, one of the things that used to be, I don't want to say more ubiquitous, but certainly utilized more in the past that I think we need to get back to are the externships while being an undergraduate. There are a lot of the land grant universities still do this and allow people to graduate in 5 years because they are working within an OEM or working within a public agency. Because you have to cultivate, to use a sports analogy, you have to cultivate your farm team so that you have people to come up through the ranks. And, people make their own personal decisions, but you want to make sure that you have an environment where people can thrive and advance. So again, multi-pronged, but all of these things I think are necessary.
May I ask you what your background, family heritage?
Sure. So I'm a mixture. My father is a African American, passed a while ago. My mother is white, Jewish. So I am a Jewish man of color. So growing up in New York City as a 4th generation New Yorker, not too big a deal, given the diversity and the cosmopolitan nature of the city. But once I was a younger man and going outside of New York, different things, different experiences, but all in all, it's been a great ride.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just because, I think it's kind of taken for granted in places like New York, New Jersey, DC, and we didn't see as much diversity here at this event, and it is a city that is more racially diverse than what we saw represented in the room.
Sure.
And within the Water Center, and here with the Water Council really stepping into a very strong leadership role in the future of the city, in the direction of the economy. Is that something that could possibly be built into the programs, into not just the kids, not just going into the inner city schools and teaching a class on water to 7th graders, but to be without it's not going overboard, it's not blaming, it's not any of this stuff. It's just a level of consciousness of, is that something that as folks are going forward that can be integrated into, for example, the Brew program, to set that as a goal to include more diversity in terms of the companies that are out there, because they are out there. There are Black and Hispanic and other nationalities that are not as represented in, and again, not just with the Water Council, but throughout the incubator programs. I mean, it takes a heck of a lot of mentorship to learn how to pitch, to learn how to deal with investors, to learn how, it is so different from just being in a lab or, working for a corporation, to go out there on your own. What you have to learn as an entrepreneur, whether you're starting a media outlet or or starting, a technology firm, to go from technology to an operating business. sales, marketing, communication, it's all part of the picture, all requires mentorship. And if we're not getting that diversity among our waterpreneurs, is it something that could be a goal that is integrated into going forward?
I would suspect so. Although I'm a newcomer to the Water Summit and the Water Council in my new role with A.O. Smith, that's certainly something our company would support, and something that we probably would support making a recommendation to the board of directors, of which we sit on. Jim Stern, our executive vice president and general counsel, sits on the board. And come up with some strategic ways to do that outreach, and work best with community partners that hopefully people are aligned with, and take steps from there.
Awesome. Because that's one thing about engineers is, every problem has a solution, and there's always an opportunity to do things better, faster, stronger.
That's true.
Yes.
That's true.
So very cool. Well, really appreciate your taking the time. I know we get the reception starting out here.
Yes.
And thanks so much. We're glad to be able to share the word about these new opportunities for the new A.O. Smith sponsored additions to the entrepreneurship, waterpreneurship programs here at the Water Council. And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, water citizens, for watching us today and for watching all the coverage on the Water Summit here in Milwaukee. Join us next week as well for American Water Works Association Annual Conference Exposition, one of the two biggest conferences of the year. 12,000 of my closest friends will be down there in Chicago. And also watch last week's coverage from the One Water Summit. Excellent. Oh, and be sure to watch us on thewatershow.org. Check out the sponsors, Radon and Optotechnic, two of the Brew companies through the Water Council. Great companies. And we will see you again on the Water Show.